Heliophysics is the study of the sun and literally everything the sun touches. So, we think of the sun as a bright light in the sky, but it's much more than that. So the outer atmosphere of the sun, the corona that you see during a total solar eclipse, actually sort of moves away. It gets accelerated, it moves away from the sun, and it carves out a protective bubble for our whole solar system as we are orbiting in the Milky Way. So the sun's atmosphere kind of protects us from interstellar space. The solar wind, this is what we call the atmosphere, it interacts with all of the planets, not just our Earth, but all of the planets. And it can cause big effects here. If it's very active on the sun, it can cause big effects for us here at Earth. We call that space weather. It can have impacts to power grids, to orbiting spacecraft, to astronauts in orbit. And the thing for me that's really cool about heliophysics is the sun is a star, and it's our star. And so even though it's hard for us to send missions to the sun, it's a lot easier to send them to the sun than it is to another star. So by learning about the sun and learning about a star, we can learn how other stars work. And that, of course, will help us as we search for life in the universe. So it took 60 years. There was a paper that was published in 1958 that predicted that the sun's atmosphere would indeed form a solar wind and expand away from the sun. And a lot of people did not believe the paper at the time. They thought it was rubbish. And so the only way to prove whether or not that was correct was to actually send spacecraft into the solar wind and see if indeed it was there. And a few years after, they did discover, yes, there is an atmosphere. The space is not empty. There is an atmosphere, and it's driven by what's coming from the sun. But going to the sun is hard. It took us a long time to actually kind of get the technology where we needed it to be. So in 1958, if you think about, the type of electronics that was available, how we communicated, there was a rotary telephone that was on the wall. And now we all have iPhones that we use for probably everything except for making a phone call. Think about how much technology you hold in your hand when you hold, a mobile phone. And so getting everything miniaturized, getting everything lightweighted, and then also finding materials that could withstand the incredible heat when we go to the sun. And so it took about 60 years to get a mission that actually could achieve and live and survive in the sun's corona. So it's doing these sort of orbits like the petals of a flower. So it goes very close to the sun, and then it comes out around the orbit of the planet Venus. In fact, we use Venus, we fly by Venus, and we use that to kind of make the orbit smaller and smaller. So as we're going through the sun's atmosphere, we're closer and closer to the sun. So it's around the end of December in 2024. I think it's December 24th, actually. We will do our closest approach. So we will get within 4 million miles of the sun's surface. And so that doesn't sound particularly close, but if you put the sun and the Earth 1 meter apart, Parker Solar Probe will be 4 centimeters from the sun. So it kind of makes you realize how close to the sun it is. The mission formally, the 7-year mission finishes in 2025, but as long as the spacecraft is still healthy, the spacecraft will continue to do these petal orbits around the sun and give us more and more data about what's going on in the corona. Yeah, so there were 3 main kind of mysteries that we wanted to study with Parker Solar Probe. One was this sort of like head-scratching, why is the atmosphere of the star hotter, 300 times hotter than the surface of the star? And that doesn't make sense. If you walk away from a campfire, it gets colder, it doesn't get hotter. If you moved away from the sun, it gets much, much hotter. And there was no sort of physical or scientific phenomena that could explain it. And so the only way you can study it is to go right up into it and take the data there. The other mystery was basically why, once it gets superheated, why this atmosphere can break away from the pull of a giant star and accelerate out into the solar system. And the third mystery was basically why does the sun have these flares, and why does it have these sort of explosive releases of energy? So they were the three things that we wanted to go and study. And we're taking data that are helping us look at those different aspects, also using data from other solar spacecraft to be able to kind of put together the whole picture. But Parker Solar Probe's actually flown into the region where sort of this magic happens, where suddenly the corona is superheated and where the acceleration starts. And we've actually gone sort of on the other side of that boundary. So if you think about the sun, it has a magnetic field, just like the Earth has a magnetic field. Very close to the sun, everything rotates kind of as one rigid body. Once you sort of get across this boundary, that's when the atmosphere starts to accelerate and moves away. So the only way to study that is to go beneath it and look at what physical processes are happening. So there are a couple of physical processes that are going on. One is called magnetic reconnection, and that's essentially where magnetic field lines break, attach, and break again. And that actually puts out a ton of energy into the system. And so that actually can cause a lot of heat. We also saw magnetic field lines that were kind of twisted on themselves, which is very hard to do. So if you think about like a long garden hose, if you put a kink in it, it wants to spring back straight again. And so magnetic fields are like that. If you put a kink in, they want to immediately sort of break and go straight, and that lets a lot of energy and heat out into the atmosphere. So that's one of the things we discovered. It protects us from a lot of cosmic rays and a lot of processes that happen sort of outside our solar system. So it actually, cosmic rays come from outside our solar system, but they can actually cause a lot of damage, a lot of radiation, a lot of actual impact from cosmic rays. And the shield that the sun's atmosphere forms keeps out about 70 to 75% of cosmic rays. So it actually does really protect us from all the stuff that's going on in interstellar space. That because we haven't been able to really send spacecraft there, the Voyager spacecraft are now in that region, but they're still very close in the scheme of things to the sun's atmosphere. But we want to eventually send a mission that will go straight out and tell us what is in interstellar space, and then we'll better understand what we're being protected against. So the location of the Aditya spacecraft being at the L1 point, it's always sitting exactly at the same point between the sun and the Earth, and so it's almost like it's like a warning system. It tells us what is coming towards the Earth, and it tells us roughly an hour before the solar wind actually impacts the Earth. The solar wind travels at about 1 million miles an hour, and so it's about 1 million miles away. So what we see there tells us, okay, this is what you should expect here at the planet. It also has a coronagraph that flies with it, and that blocks out the light of the sun, so essentially creates a solar eclipse. So you can really study the corona and look at the big events that will be coming towards us, and they're the ones that we care about. But with Parker Solar Probe very close, taking the measurements really close to the sun, Solar Orbiter, being able to look at the sun in different wavelengths and different ways of looking at the sun. Solar Orbiter will actually move out of the ecliptic plane, so the Earth-Sun line, it will move up, and it will be able to look down on the poles of the sun, which is going to be a unique viewpoint for us. And then Aditya-L1 providing that sort of warning system and allowing us to really study the corona and what is coming in the solar wind. So the three of them making just a great team to study the sun. Obviously, Earth science, NISAR is the big thing we're so excited about now. And that's the first sort of big flagship mission that NASA and ISRO have done together, each bringing their sort of their piece of it together on the spacecraft. Really groundbreaking science, but also the applications that are really important to India. Things like looking at agriculture and how agriculture is changing, how the coastal regions are changing, soil moisture, how the Himalayan glaciers kind of affect climate. So it's a really great partnership of not just doing amazing science together, but also producing the results that really impact our daily lives and our ability to protect our planet. So we'll have a very big study. We've got all kinds of different experimenters that will do experiments during the total solar eclipse. There are things like it creates an artificial night time when the solar eclipse happens, and so at the ionosphere, our sort of protective atmosphere suddenly becomes like night. And so it changes like that from day to night. It's very different to like just the sun setting and you getting the sort of the regular cycle. It's just like an instant night that you get. You'll see things like animals go quiet, nighttime animals come out. It's a very big change. The atmosphere itself changes. We will have sounding rockets. We'll have balloons that are looking at how the planet changes because of an eclipse. Obviously, it's a great time to look really close to the sun because we don't. It's not an artificial eclipse. It's an actual moon. We're able to look at the photosphere and study that. And so that's really exciting. All of those data are public. We have a lot of citizen science where we have volunteers all over the world that join us and make scientific discoveries with our data. And so we really encourage anyone to look up our NASA Citizen Science program, and you can find that at science.nasa.gov. It's the website. You can find out all the information there. But the thing I'm also very excited about is that we just launched the PACE spacecraft just last month. And those first light images, the first light data coming out from PACE, if you think our planet is beautiful, wait till you see the PACE images. So that's what I'm excited about.